parents refuse to pay for my college but expect me to care for them. I always thought that when the time came for me to go to college, my parents would support my dreams and ambitions. Growing up, I watched them work tirelessly to provide for our family, and I assumed that their sacrifices would translate into my education. But as I approached high school graduation, the reality set in that my parents had no intention of paying for my college tuition. The conversations leading up to that moment were filled with vague promises and half-hearted reassurances. I remember the night it all came to a head. I sat my parents down, excitement bubbling inside me as I shared my acceptance letter to a local university with a fantastic program in my field of interest. Their faces didn't light up with pride as I expected. Instead, they exchanged glances that made my stomach churn. "We need to talk," my dad said, his tone serious. "Your mother and I have been discussing the future, and we can't afford to pay for your college." My heart sank. "What do you mean? You've always said education is important." I was pleading now, desperate for some kind of hope. "We just can't swing it," my mom replied, her voice devoid of any empathy. "You'll have to figure it out on your own." I felt like the world was crashing down around me. All the late nights studying, all the sacrifices I had made, suddenly seemed pointless. I had worked hard to maintain my grades, thinking that it would lead to this moment, but here I was, facing rejection from the very people who I thought would have my back. They suggested I take out loans or find a job, but the thought of graduating with a mountain of debt terrified me. I had already planned to apply for scholarships, but I didn't want to be at the mercy of some random committee. As if that wasn't enough, my parents had the audacity to add, "And once you're out of college, we expect you to help take care of us." It felt like a slap in the face. After everything they had said, they were now expecting me to bear the burden of their care while I was still trying to figure out my own future. I stormed out of the room, my emotions boiling over. I couldn't believe how selfish they were being. I had always thought we were a family that supported one another, but it became painfully clear that their love came with strings attached. In the weeks that followed, I tried to stay focused on my goal of attending college, but the weight of my parents' rejection was crushing. I applied for every scholarship I could find, spending hours writing essays and gathering recommendation letters. I even picked up a part-time job at a local cafe, trying to save money for tuition. It was exhausting, and the pressure only increased as graduation approached. I often found myself lying awake at night, worrying about how I would manage to pay for college and still support my family. I wanted to scream at my parents for expecting me to be their caregiver when they wouldn't even support my education. But deep down, I feared the fallout. I knew they wouldn't take it well if I expressed my frustrations. Then, one day, my mom fell ill. It started with a cold, but it quickly escalated into something more serious. I rushed home from work when I got the call from my dad, who sounded frantic. As soon as I walked through the door, I was bombarded with their expectations once again. "You need to take care of your mother," he insisted. "I can't manage this alone." My heart raced. I was already stretched thin, and now they wanted me to play nurse on top of everything else. I helped my mom as best as I could, taking her to the doctor and managing the household chores, all while balancing my job and preparing for college. I felt like I was drowning, and with every passing day, the resentment towards my parents grew. I wanted to scream that I wasn't their maid, that I shouldn't have to put my life on hold because they decided to have children and then refused to support them. The situation only intensified. My mom's health took longer to improve than I expected, and the strain of juggling my responsibilities began to wear on me. I began to neglect my studies, and with finals approaching, I started to panic. I finally confronted my parents about how I felt. "I can't do this anymore. I'm supposed to be preparing for college, but all I do is take care of you," I shouted one evening, the frustration boiling over. "You made your choices, and now you expect me to sacrifice everything for you?" My dad's face hardened. "We gave you everything we could, and now you're throwing it back in our faces. You're being selfish." My mom looked at me with tears in her eyes, but instead of sympathy, I felt anger rising. "You expect me to pay for your college and then take care of you. I didn't ask to be your caregiver." I stormed out of the house, my mind racing. I needed to clear my head and think. I drove aimlessly around town, feeling the weight of my situation crashing down on me. Eventually, I pulled into a park and sat in my car, staring at the clouds. I realized I had a decision to make. I could either continue down this path of resentment and bitterness, or I could break free from their expectations. That night, I made a plan. I would finish my current job and focus solely on my college applications. I would take control of my future, regardless of what my parents wanted from me. The next day, I went home and announced my decision. I'm not going to take care of you anymore. I need to focus on my college applications and my future. I'm done being your backup plan. The reaction was explosive. My dad shouted, calling me ungrateful, and my mom sobbed uncontrollably, claiming I was abandoning them. But I stood firm. I wasn't abandoning them, I was finally prioritizing myself for once. The weeks that followed were tense. My parents refused to speak to me, and the house was filled with a heavy silence that made it clear that the dynamic had changed. I was still applying for scholarships, and I managed to secure a couple that would help ease my financial burden. But every day felt like a battle, and I constantly worried about what would happen when I finally left for college. Graduation came, and I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. My parents attended, but it was as if they were there out of obligation rather than support. The pride I had hoped to see in their eyes was replaced by a cold indifference. I felt detached from them, as if I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I realized that I had chosen a different path. I was finally breaking free from their expectations and carving out my own future. I packed my bags for college, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. As I drove away from home, I took one last look at the place I had grown up in. I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was finally choosing to live for myself, and while the road ahead was uncertain, it was mine to navigate. And as I embarked on this new chapter, I realized that I could be the one in control of my life, despite my parents' demands. It was time for me to build my own future, free from the weight of their expectations. The most embarrassing moment of my life, lessons learned. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, just like any other. I never imagined it would end up being the most embarrassing moment of my life, one that would haunt me for years to come. I was at a local coffee shop, grabbing my usual morning caffeine fix before heading to work. Everything felt normal. I walked up to the counter, ordered my coffee, and stood in line waiting for my name to be called. As I was scrolling through my phone, I didn't notice how crowded the shop had become. The line was long, and the buzz of conversations filled the air. I could hear the sounds of steam from the espresso machine, the clink of cups and saucers, and the occasional burst of laughter. I had just finished reading a text from a friend when I heard my name. Samantha. The barista called, holding up my coffee cup with a bright smile. Here you go. I looked up, smiled back, and walked over to grab my drink. As I reached for it, I felt a sharp push from behind. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to make me lose my balance. In that instant, my heart sank. My hand went to steady myself, but my coffee cup, which had been in my other hand, flew out of my grasp. It was like slow motion, the cup tumbling through the air. The moment it landed, it exploded in a mess of hot coffee and splattered all over the counter, the barista, and, most painfully, me. The hot liquid burned through the fabric of my shirt, and I yelped in surprise and pain. The people around me froze. The barista's eyes widened in shock, and everyone turned to stare as the thick, dark coffee dripped down my arms and legs. I was covered in it. The embarrassment hit me instantly, flooding my face with heat. I tried to apologize, but my voice caught in my throat. I was mortified, completely frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The barista, trying to recover from the situation, rushed to grab napkins and a towel, but the damage had already been done. People in line behind me shuffled uncomfortably, and some even turned away to avoid the awkwardness. My heart was racing. I wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. I tried to wipe the coffee off my shirt, but it just smeared and stained my clothes further. The burn from the liquid was still sharp, and the worst part was the laughter. Not from anyone in particular, but from the uncomfortable, awkward chuckles that spread through the crowd. It was as though everyone was trying to stifle their amusement at my expense. I could feel their eyes on me, the weight of their judgment sinking in. The barista, now looking utterly uncomfortable, handed me a paper towel and apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded numbly, but my face was still burning with embarrassment. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be there anymore, but I also didn't want to run out, drawing even more attention to myself. So, I just stood there, awkwardly dabbing at my shirt, hoping I could somehow fix the situation. But I couldn't. I knew it was hopeless. I had become the focal point of the morning, and everyone in that coffee shop knew exactly who I was. I glanced around, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I just wanted to grab my coffee and leave, but I couldn't bring myself to look anyone in the eye. Instead, I turned to walk out the door, my shirt still wet and uncomfortable, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze following me. I made it to the door when I heard a voice call out behind me. "Hey, you dropped something." I turned, my face a mask of humiliation, but there was no one there. It took me a second to realize the voice had come from a man standing near the counter, who was now pointing down at the floor. My heart stopped. I looked down and saw, lying at my feet, my wallet. It must have fallen from my bag when I reached for the coffee, but in my panic, I hadn't noticed. "Oh my God," I muttered, feeling like I was about to implode. I bent down to pick it up, but as I did, I felt something else. A sharp pain shot through my foot. It was like a jolt of electricity, and I cried out in pain as I stumbled back. A small paper clip had somehow found its way under my foot, and I stepped on it wrong. The pain intensified, and I nearly lost my balance. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I hobbled to the door, my foot throbbing, my shirt still soaked in coffee, and my wallet clutched tightly in my hand. I could hear people behind me whispering, some still trying to stifle their laughter. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to escape. As I limped out into the street, I heard the coffee shop door close behind me, the faint sound of muffled voices still echoing in my head. The rest of the day was a blur. I got to work, but my focus was gone. My colleagues greeted me with concerned looks, noticing my disheveled state and the visible burn marks on my arms. I just shrugged it off, telling them I'd had an accident at the coffee shop. They were sympathetic, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were all thinking the same thing. I was a walking disaster. The embarrassment of the morning lingered with me for hours. I kept replaying every moment in my head, imagining how ridiculous I must have looked. The whole situation was completely absurd, but the worst part wasn't the coffee or the burn marks. It was how I let it all consume me. I let that one moment of clumsiness define my day, my mood, and my mindset. I let it affect the way I saw myself and the way I thought others saw me. And that's when I realized something important. It wasn't the coffee, the burn, or the awkwardness that had ruined my day. It was how I reacted to it. How I let a small, embarrassing incident snowball into something I couldn't escape from. That's when I decided to change my perspective. I started to laugh at myself. The incident was embarrassing, yes, but it wasn't the end of the world. I could move past it, learn from it, and let it go. I learned that sometimes the most embarrassing moments can teach you valuable lessons about resilience, about not taking yourself too seriously, and about finding humor in the unexpected. After all, life is messy, and not everything is going to go according to plan. But it's how we handle those moments that truly defines us. Looking back, that embarrassing moment taught me more than any other event in my life. It taught me that failure isn't something to run from, but something to embrace and learn from. It taught me that sometimes, the best thing to do in a moment of humiliation is to take a deep breath, laugh, and move on. And above all, it taught me that it's okay to make mistakes. What matters is how you grow from them. And that day, I learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate the power of a good laugh at your own expense. It can turn even the most embarrassing moment into something empowering. My friend's partner made a pass at me. Should I tell them? It all started on a seemingly normal Saturday evening, when my friend Mia invited me over for a small get-together. Mia and I had been best friends since childhood, navigating the ups and downs of life together. She had recently started dating a guy named Tom, who seemed charming and funny at first. I hadn't known him for long, but he quickly integrated himself into our friend group, and I wanted to be supportive. As the night unfolded, laughter filled the room. Mia and Tom were cozy on the couch, and the rest of us were enjoying snacks and drinks. Everything felt light and fun, but something shifted when the two of them stepped outside for a moment, leaving me alone in the living room with Tom's friend, Mark. Mark had always been friendly, but there was a tension in the air that night. After a couple of drinks, he leaned in closer to me, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered, "You know, I've always thought you were really attractive." My heart raced, unsure how to respond. I chuckled awkwardly, brushing it off as a drunken compliment. But as the night went on, Mark's comments became bolder. "You'd be a lot more fun to hang out with than Mia," he said, flashing a grin that made my skin crawl. I tried to laugh it off, but I felt a knot forming in my stomach. When Mia returned, I desperately wanted to confide in her, but I hesitated. What if she didn't believe me? What if it ruined their relationship? As the evening progressed, I kept a close eye on Mark, who continued to make subtle advances. He touched my arm lightly when he spoke, and at one point, he even leaned in to kiss my cheek, his lips lingering a bit too long. I felt frozen in that moment, torn between loyalty to my friend and the unsettling realization that I was being pursued by her partner's friend. I spent the rest of the evening trying to act normal, but I could feel the weight of Mark's gaze on me. Every time I caught his eye, my heart would race, and I could feel my palms sweat. I wanted to leave but didn't want to hurt Mia's feelings or cause a scene. As the night drew to a close, I finally mustered the courage to confront Mark. "You should really stop flirting with me," I said firmly, my voice shaking slightly. He laughed it off, acting as if I was overreacting, which only made me more uneasy. After everyone had left, I stayed behind to help Mia clean up. As we sorted through empty bottles and plates, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Should I tell her what had happened? I imagined how she might react. Would she think I was lying or just trying to stir up drama? Mia and I had always promised to be honest with each other, but this felt different. I had never wanted to come between her and someone she cared about, especially not for something like this. That night, I hardly slept. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment in my head, questioning if I should reach out to Mia or keep my mouth shut. The next few days dragged on as I grappled with the situation. I started distancing myself from Mark, avoiding gatherings where he might be present. But each time I saw Mia, I felt the guilt creep back in. Finally, after a week of internal turmoil, I decided to confide in my best friend. We met at our favorite cafe, and I felt a mix of dread and relief as I sat across from her. I hesitated, unsure of how to start. "Mia, can we talk about something?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. She looked at me curiously, sensing my unease. "Of course, what's wrong?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my words. "It's about Tom's friend, Mark." Mia's expression shifted slightly, her eyes narrowing. "What about him?" I recounted everything that had happened that night, the compliments, the lingering touches, the way I felt uncomfortable. As I spoke, I watched her face transform from confusion to disbelief. "Are you serious? He did that?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to cause problems, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." Mia's hands trembled as she processed what I was saying. "I can't believe this," she said, shaking her head. "I thought he was different." I felt a mix of relief and fear wash over me. Relief that I had finally told her, but fear of how she would react. Would she confront Mark? Would it damage their relationship? What should I do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mia looked determined. "You deserve to feel safe around my boyfriend's friends, and I'm going to talk to him about this." My heart sank a little, knowing that it could create tension between them. "Are you sure?" I asked hesitantly. "I don't want to cause drama." "This isn't drama," she replied fiercely. "This is about respect. I can't let someone treat my friends like that." I felt a rush of gratitude for her support, but deep down, I feared how Tom might react. Mia promised to have a conversation with him that evening. I left the cafe feeling a strange mix of hope and dread. That night, I received a text from Mia. "I talked to Tom. He's going to confront Mark. I'll let you know what happens." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but a gnawing anxiety settled in its place. Would Mark deny it? Would he retaliate against me for saying something? I spent the night anxiously awaiting her update, wondering how it would all play out. The next day, Mia called me, her voice shaky. "Hey, can we meet up again? I need to talk to you." My heart raced as I agreed, fearing the worst. When I arrived, I could see she had been crying. "What happened?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. Tom confronted Mark, and it didn't go well, she admitted, wiping her eyes. Mark denied everything and accused me of being jealous. He said I was just trying to break them up. I felt a surge of anger for her, knowing how unfair it was. That's ridiculous. You're not jealous, you're protecting yourself and your friends. Mia nodded, clearly hurt. But Tom is caught in the middle. He doesn't know what to believe. As we talked, I felt an overwhelming urge to take responsibility for what had happened. Maybe I should reach out to Tom, I suggested. I can tell him what Mark said and how uncomfortable I felt. Are you sure? Mia asked, concern etched on her face. I don't want you to feel pressured. I took a deep breath, determined to take action. I need to be honest with him, for both of our sakes. That evening, I texted Tom, asking if we could talk. He replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet. As I walked into the coffee shop, my heart raced. When I saw Tom, he looked tense. Hey, he said, offering a weak smile. I've been hearing some things. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. I just wanted to clear the air about Mark. He made me uncomfortable at the party, and I feel like it's important you know what happened. As I recounted my experience, Tom's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. I can't believe he did that, he said, shaking his head. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety as we talked. Tom listened, validating my feelings and expressing anger towards Mark's behavior. I'll talk to him again, he said, determination in his voice. I left feeling hopeful that we were on the same page, but I still feared the fallout. In the following days, the tension in our friend group was palpable. Mark tried to brush off what happened, acting as if it were a joke, but it was clear that trust had been broken. Mia and Tom had to reevaluate their relationship with him, and it strained their dynamic. As the weeks went by, I learned how difficult it can be to navigate friendships and relationships when lines get blurred. Eventually, Tom decided to cut ties with Mark, realizing that his behavior was unacceptable. Mia supported him wholeheartedly, and I felt a mix of relief and guilt for how everything unfolded. I knew that I had done the right thing by speaking up, but it came at a cost. I still worried about how Mark would react if he found out I had spoken to Tom. But as time went on, Mia and Tom grew stronger, their bond solidified by the challenges they faced together. And I felt grateful to have friends who valued honesty and respect above all else. So, my advice to anyone in a similar situation, speak up. It's never easy, but your feelings matter, and standing up for yourself can lead to a healthier, more honest environment. Sometimes, you have to take risks to protect the ones you love, and in the end, it's worth it. Aita for not inviting my estranged mother to my wedding. I never wanted to be the villain in my own story, but here we are. I'm getting married in just 2 days, and I've been sitting here, staring at the invitation list, feeling sick to my stomach. You see, I didn't invite my mother. That's right, my estranged mother. The woman who left when I was 10 and showed up again when I was 15. The woman who, well, let me take you back to where it all began. My childhood wasn't filled with fairy tales. My mother was like a storm that never passed, constantly brewing with chaos. I remember the way she would sit on the couch, a glass of wine clutched in her hand, her eyes glazed over like she was staring into another world. My father tried his best, but I think even he was lost in the storm. I can still hear the yelling, the tears, and the way the walls felt like they were closing in on me. There was a night that changed everything. I must have been about 10. I had just won a spelling bee at school, my first real accomplishment. I ran home, bursting with excitement, ready to show my mother my trophy. I found her in the living room, the TV blaring as she slumped on the couch. Look what I won, Mom, I shouted, holding the trophy high above my head. She barely glanced at it. That's nice, honey, she said, her voice dripping with disinterest. I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, but I pressed on, hoping to spark some sort of connection. Can we celebrate? Maybe go out for ice cream? In an instant, her mood shifted. She exploded. Ice cream? You think I have money for ice cream? You're just like your father, always wanting more. She knocked my trophy to the floor, and it shattered into pieces. I stood there, speechless, as she hurled insults that cut deeper than any knife. After that night, I learned to stay out of her way. I became a ghost in my own home. When she left for good, I thought it was the best day of my life. I was finally free. But freedom came with its own set of chains. My father fell apart, and I had to step up. I became the caretaker of my own broken family. Fast forward to my engagement. Jake is everything I ever wanted. He's kind, funny, and supportive. He's been my rock through all the chaos. We planned a beautiful wedding, and for once, I felt like I was on solid ground. But as I sent out the invitations, I faced the inevitable decision: do I invite my mother? I thought about it for days, weighing my options. What would it look like to have her there? She hadn't reached out in years, no phone calls, no birthdays, nothing. The thought of her walking through those doors, her chaotic energy overwhelming the happiness I'd built, made my stomach churn. I made my choice. I didn't invite her. It felt right, but the anxiety lingered like a dark cloud. Friends and family were supportive, telling me it was my day and I had the right to choose who would share it with me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a mistake. Then, the strange things began. It started with an unsettling phone call. I answered, only to hear heavy breathing on the other end. My heart raced as I glanced at the caller ID, unknown. I hung up, dismissing it as a prank. But then I received a message on social media, something vague and cryptic: "You'll regret your decision." I brushed it off, but I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched. Every time I stepped outside, a chill ran down my spine, as if someone were lurking just out of sight. My friends noticed my unease and urged me to reconsider inviting her. What if she shows up? One friend said, "You need to be prepared." But I wasn't going to give in to fear. I was done being controlled by her presence. The night before the wedding, I lay in bed, anxiety gnawing at me. I tossed and turned, but sleep eluded me. That's when the nightmares began. I dreamt of my mother, her face twisted in anger, her voice echoing through the darkness, telling me I'd made a terrible mistake. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. The day of the wedding dawned bright and sunny, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I prepared, I noticed odd things. A photo of my mother from years ago appeared on my nightstand, though I had tucked it away in a box. My skin prickled with unease. At the venue, surrounded by friends and family, I tried to push my fears aside. Everything was perfect: the flowers, the decorations, the love in the air. But then it happened. Just as the ceremony was about to start, I saw her. My mother, standing at the edge of the crowd, looking different, disheveled, wild-eyed. My heart dropped. I felt a surge of panic as she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the joyous atmosphere. "You can't do this without me. You need to hear the truth," guests gasped, and I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I took in the scene. My mother wasn't just back, she was erratic and desperate, her eyes wide and wild as she looked around, searching for me. The officiant tried to calm her, but she pushed past him, drawing nearer. "You don't understand," she shouted. "You think you're free. You're just like me. This wedding is a lie." A shiver ran through me as memories flooded back, the chaos, the instability. "Mom, please. You don't belong here," I yelled, my voice breaking. Then she revealed something that made my blood run cold. "You think you're safe? You don't know what I've done for you. I kept the darkness away so you could live a normal life. But you'll never escape me." The air grew heavy, suffocating. My friends stepped back, exchanging worried glances. I felt a wave of panic rise within me, and I realized that the years of estrangement hadn't kept her darkness at bay. It had only festered, waiting for a moment like this. The crowd murmured, confusion and fear in their eyes. I caught Jake's gaze, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. I turned to my mother, desperate to understand what she meant. "What are you talking about?" But she only laughed, a chilling, manic sound that echoed through the venue. "You'll find out soon enough. Just remember, you invited this darkness into your life." In that moment, I knew I had to protect what I had built. I couldn't let her ruin my day. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice rising above the chaos. "You're not welcome here." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Her expression shifted, and for a brief moment, I saw something else in her eyes: hurt, vulnerability. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. With a shake of her head, she turned and fled, disappearing into the crowd. The tension in the air was palpable, but I had to push through. The ceremony resumed, but my heart was still racing. I felt the weight of her presence linger, like a shadow creeping into my thoughts. As I exchanged vows with Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling that my mother had left a mark on this day. A reminder that no matter how far I ran, her darkness would always be a part of me. After the ceremony, I found a moment alone on the balcony, trying to clear my mind. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything, but the unease refused to leave me. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Jake, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know," I admitted. I thought I was free from her. I thought this was my chance to start fresh. Jake pulled me into a comforting embrace. "You are free, but you can't change your past. Just focus on us. We'll figure this out together." As we stood there, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe my mother was right about one thing: I had invited darkness into my life by not confronting my past. But I didn't have to let it control me anymore. I could choose to move forward, to embrace the love I had found. But as the night wore on, the feeling of unease returned. I glanced around, half expecting to see my mother lurking in the shadows, waiting for her moment to strike. And as I looked out into the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder, was I truly safe? Or was the darkness always going to be a part of me? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: I would fight to protect my new life, no matter what it took. So, am I the asshole for not inviting my estranged mother to my wedding? Maybe. But sometimes, to protect the light, you have to confront the shadows lurking in the corners of your heart. I'll let you decide. Entitled parent demands my life savings for their kid's college fund. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I'm in my late 20s. For years, I've worked hard, saving every penny I could for my future. I've always believed in the value of hard work and financial independence. Growing up, my parents instilled in me the importance of saving and planning for the future. I was proud of my small savings account, meticulously built over time, which represented my dreams of home ownership and financial security. Everything changed when I met an entitled parent at a community event. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and I was enjoying the local farmers market, browsing stalls and sampling fresh produce. That's when I struck up a conversation with Lisa, a mother who was proudly boasting about her kids. She had an infectious energy about her, and I initially found her enthusiasm endearing. As we chatted, she told me all about her daughter, who was starting college soon. I admired her dedication to her children's education, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about her attitude. She casually mentioned how she was struggling to cover the tuition fees. I offered my sympathy, thinking how hard it must be to manage finances with kids in college. Little did I know, that small talk would lead to a nightmare. A few days later, I received a text from Lisa, out of the blue. It was a simple message asking if I had a moment to chat. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we had shared a pleasant conversation. I agreed to meet her at the local cafe. As I walked in, Lisa was already there, sitting at a table with an eager smile. We exchanged pleasantries, but soon the conversation took a turn. "Jake," she said, her tone shifting to something more serious, "I really need your help." My heart sank. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. Lisa went on to explain that her daughter's college tuition was due soon, and despite her best efforts, she just couldn't cover it all. "I know you have a decent amount saved up," she said, leaning closer. "I was hoping you could lend me some money to help her out. It would mean the world to me." I felt my stomach drop. "Lisa, I don't think I can do that. I've been saving for a home, and it's really all I have." The look on her face turned from hope to disbelief. "But you're in a good place financially." "It's just money, Jake. It's for my daughter's future." I shook my head, feeling cornered. "I'm sorry, but I really can't. It's not that simple." The conversation escalated as she pressed me further. "You're being selfish. If you really cared about education, you'd help us out. You have the means, and this could change my daughter's life." I felt the walls closing in. "It's not about being selfish. It's my savings. I worked hard for this." Lisa's demeanor shifted. She was no longer the enthusiastic mother I had met. She was angry now, a different side of her, that I hadn't seen. You can't let your selfishness stand in the way of my child's future. Think about it. You have no idea what it's like to struggle. I left the cafe feeling violated and angry. Over the next few days, I tried to forget about our encounter, but Lisa's words echoed in my mind. It felt like emotional manipulation. The pressure to help her was mounting, but I knew I couldn't give in. A week later, I received another message from Lisa, this time more aggressive. Jake, my daughter is counting on you. If you don't help us, we'll lose everything. My heart raced with anxiety. I decided I had to find out more about her situation. I reached out to a few mutual friends, trying to piece together the truth behind Lisa's claims. What I discovered shocked me. It turned out that Lisa had a history of being entitled and manipulative. She had constantly relied on others to bail her out of financial problems and had a reputation for making unrealistic demands. I felt a surge of anger mixed with relief. I wasn't alone in feeling that something wasn't right. Armed with this knowledge, I felt ready to confront her. The next time I saw Lisa was at a neighborhood barbecue. She approached me with her usual smile, but I could see the tension behind it. Jake, have you thought more about helping out? She asked sweetly. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Lisa, I've heard some things, and I want to be clear. I can't help you. Her expression shifted instantly to one of fury. You think you're better than us? You're nothing but a self-righteous prick. Her outburst drew the attention of others at the barbecue. I stood my ground. I'm just trying to protect myself. You can't expect everyone to cater to your demands. The confrontation became heated, and Lisa's face twisted in rage as she shouted accusations about my character. You're going to regret this, Jake. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I felt a chill run down my spine. The weight of her threats hung in the air. After that day, the situation escalated further. Lisa began spreading rumors about me in our community, painting me as greedy and uncaring. I started to feel isolated, watching as friends I once trusted began to pull away. The anxiety of the situation gnawed at me, and I knew I had to take action. I considered reporting her behavior, but part of me hesitated, unsure if it would make things worse. Then, one evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Jake, we need to talk. Meet me at the old park after dark. My heart raced at the thought. Was it Lisa? I had no choice but to confront this once and for all. As night fell, I made my way to the park, my mind racing with possibilities. I arrived to find Lisa waiting, her figure illuminated by the dim light of a nearby lamp. You're brave, I'll give you that, she sneered as I approached. But you've made a big mistake. I stood tall, refusing to let fear consume me. I'm not scared of you, Lisa. I know what you've been doing, and I won't let you manipulate me anymore. Her smile twisted into something sinister. You don't understand the lengths I'm willing to go to protect my family. In that moment, I realized how deep her entitlement ran. She was a force to be reckoned with, someone who believed the world owed her something. I felt the need to protect myself and my reputation. I pulled out my phone, ready to document this encounter. You're not going to get away with this, Lisa. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Her expression faltered for a moment, but then her anger returned. You think you can intimidate me with that little phone? You have no idea who you're dealing with. The tension between us crackled like electricity, and I realized that I was finally standing my ground. You're not going to manipulate me anymore. I'm done. I turned to leave, my heart racing with adrenaline, but before I could take a step, she lunged at me, grabbing my arm. You think you can walk away? You'll regret this. I jerked my arm away and hurried out of the park, my mind racing. I knew I had to take a stand. The next day, I reached out to some of the friends who had distanced themselves and shared the truth about Lisa's behavior. To my surprise, many of them had seen through her facade, and they were willing to stand by me. I organized a small gathering, inviting everyone who had been affected by Lisa's actions. We shared stories and experiences, realizing how far she had manipulated people. Empowered by the support of my friends, I decided to confront Lisa publicly. At the next community meeting, I stood up and recounted my experience, detailing how she had pressured me and spread lies about me. As I spoke, I could see heads nodding in agreement, and the atmosphere shifted. Lisa's face turned crimson with anger, and she tried to interrupt, but the crowd hushed her. I realized then that I wasn't alone in this fight. When the meeting ended, people began coming up to me, expressing their support and sharing similar stories about Lisa's entitlement. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. No longer was I the target, I was part of a collective voice against her manipulation. Lisa, on the other hand, was now the one on the outskirts, isolated and angry. The final straw came a few weeks later when Lisa tried to approach me again, her demeanor more subdued. "Jake, I think we can work something out," she said, desperation in her eyes. "Let's just put this behind us." I looked her dead in the eye, my voice steady. "You had your chance, Lisa. You can't keep using people to get what you want. I'm not afraid of you anymore." I turned away, feeling a sense of empowerment wash over me. The experience had changed me, forcing me to confront not just Lisa but my own fears. I realized that entitlement could manifest in many ways, and sometimes, standing up for yourself was the only way to reclaim your life. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the support I had found in my community. I had learned valuable lessons about boundaries, entitlement, and the power of standing your ground. While Lisa's story was still far from over, I knew that I had taken a stand for myself, and in doing so, I had inspired others to do the same. It's a reminder to always be cautious about whom to trust and to stand firm against those who seek to exploit kindness. My experience with a scary stranger, what I learned. I didn't expect to have an encounter like that, especially in the middle of a normal, uneventful evening. It started with me just trying to take a walk after work. I was feeling a little stressed, nothing out of the ordinary, just trying to clear my head, get some fresh air. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where you don't really expect anything unusual to happen. The houses were all well kept, and the street lamps flickered like they always did, casting long shadows along the sidewalks. Everything was calm, almost too calm. I was halfway through my walk when I noticed him. At first, I thought he was just another person out for a stroll. He was a tall man, wearing a long, dark coat, even though it wasn't particularly cold outside. His face was partially hidden by the collar of the coat, and he seemed to be walking in the same direction as me. I didn't think much of it at first. People walk in the same direction all the time, right? But then I realized something odd. He wasn't just walking at a normal pace like me, he was moving with purpose, staying just far enough behind me that it didn't seem like he was trying to pass, but close enough that I couldn't shake the feeling he was following me. I quickened my pace, hoping to outdistance him, but when I did, so did he. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but the more I tried to walk faster, the more he matched my stride. That's when my anxiety kicked in. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that maybe he was just heading the same way and it was all just coincidence. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. My heart started racing, and my hands felt clammy. I glanced over my shoulder just enough to catch a glimpse of his face, and that's when I saw it. He wasn't looking straight ahead like a normal person would, his eyes were locked on me, and he wasn't trying to hide it. He was staring, and it wasn't just a casual glance, no, this was intense, almost predatory. I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to shake it off and told myself I was just overreacting. But then he spoke. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was enough to send a shiver through my entire body. "You should be careful," he said. His words weren't threatening exactly, but there was something about the tone that made it clear he wasn't just making small talk. It was as if he knew something I didn't, like he was warning me, but not in a way that made me feel safe. More like he was hinting at something far darker. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to sound calm. I felt stupid the moment the words left my mouth. Why was I even engaging with this guy? But it was too late now. "You never know what's out there," he replied cryptically. "It's dangerous to walk around alone at night. There's a lot you don't see." I froze in my tracks. My brain was screaming at me to just turn around and go home, but my legs wouldn't move. I wanted to ask him what he meant, what exactly he was referring to, but something told me I didn't want to know. He took a step closer, and my heart nearly stopped. "You've heard the stories, haven't you?" he said. I wanted to say no, to lie and pretend I had no idea what he was talking about, but I couldn't. I'd heard the rumors, the whispers of strange things happening in the area, of people disappearing, of unexplainable events that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But I never thought any of it was true. Not really. What stories? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smirked, an unsettling expression that made my stomach turn. People go missing around here. You're lucky to be out so late. You might not make it home if you keep walking this way. He didn't move any closer, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. His presence was overwhelming, and I felt like the world around me had gone still. I couldn't see anyone else around, and the streetlights, which should have made me feel safe, only added to the sense of isolation. The wind had picked up, but the trees didn't sway. It was like the whole world had gone quiet, holding its breath. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice finally gaining a bit of strength, though it wavered with fear. Nothing, he said simply. I just want you to understand. There's no going back once you walk too far down this road. It's better to just turn around and go home. Trust me. My instincts were screaming at me to run, to get as far away from this guy as possible, but I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the spot, and all I could do was stare at him, unable to tear my eyes away. I didn't know what to do, what was real and what wasn't. He took another step closer, and this time I noticed something that sent a jolt of fear through me. His coat, which had looked normal at first, was somehow wrong. There were long, dark stains on it that I hadn't noticed before, and they looked fresh. Almost like blood. You should have listened, he said, almost sadly, as if I had disappointed him. Now it's too late. That's when I snapped. I turned and bolted. I didn't look back, I didn't need to. My mind was focused on one thing, getting away from him. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my heart pounding. I could hear his footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare turn around. I couldn't let myself slow down. The feeling of his presence, his eyes on my back, kept me running, kept me pushing through the exhaustion and the fear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I made it to a busier street, where the sounds of traffic and people reassured me. I stopped, panting, my chest heaving with the effort. I glanced over my shoulder, but he was gone. I couldn't see him anywhere. My mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. Had it all been in my head? Had I imagined the whole thing? I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching me. I don't know if I'll ever really understand what happened that night. All I know is that I'll never forget the way he looked at me, the way he spoke, and the way his words stuck with me long after I'd left him behind. I don't walk alone at night anymore, not in that neighborhood, and I've learned to trust my gut when something feels off. I don't know if what that man said was true, but something about the way he spoke, about the way he looked at me, made me believe that there was more to this world than we're willing to admit. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't the encounter itself, but the way it leaves you questioning what's real. Aita for not paying for my siblings' wedding when I wasn't invited? I always thought family was everything. Growing up with my older sister Sarah, we were as close as siblings could be. We shared secrets, dreams, and even our clothes. But as we got older, things began to change. Sarah became the golden child, the one everyone praised for her accomplishments and beauty. I, on the other hand, struggled to find my footing. While I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, Sarah was effortlessly excelling in her career and getting engaged to a successful businessman named Mike. Their wedding was the talk of the family, and I was happy for her. Or at least I thought I was. A few months before the wedding, I started to sense something was off. My family was buzzing with excitement, discussing the lavish details of the ceremony. There were extravagant venues, fancy invitations, and a guest list that felt like a who's who of society. As the date approached, I noticed that I hadn't received an invitation. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was an oversight. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being left out. I decided to confront Sarah. "Hey, did you send out the wedding invitations yet?" I asked one evening, trying to keep my tone light. She glanced at me, her expression shifting slightly. "Oh, yeah, I sent them out a while ago. You should have received yours by now." My heart sank. "I didn't get one," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, that's strange," she replied, her voice a bit too casual. "Maybe it got lost in the mail?" I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it quickly vanished. "Don't worry. I'll send you the details." It felt like a feeble attempt to smooth things over, and deep down, I knew I wouldn't be getting a real invitation. I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter, that I was happy for her. But as the wedding date approached, it became increasingly difficult to pretend. On the day of the wedding, I scrolled through social media, watching as pictures flooded in from family and friends. The venue was stunning, the decor was beautiful, and everyone looked so happy. My heart ached as I saw the smiling faces of family members celebrating, the ones I had grown up with. I felt like a ghost, hovering on the outskirts of my own family's joy. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through endless photos of the wedding. I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. How could my sister do this? I had always supported her, celebrated her achievements, and now I was being left out of one of the most important days of her life. In my frustration, I decided to vent to my friends. "Can you believe Sarah didn't invite me to her wedding?" I said during dinner with my closest friends. "I mean, we grew up together. I always thought we were close." They listened patiently as I poured out my feelings, validating my hurt. "You're not obligated to pay for her wedding if you weren't invited," one friend said. "It's not fair that she expects you to contribute when she clearly doesn't value your presence." As the conversation unfolded, I started to wonder if they were right. If I wasn't invited to the wedding, did I have to help pay for it? The next day, I received a message from my parents. They were asking me to contribute to the wedding costs. My heart dropped. How could they expect me to pay for something I wasn't even part of? I decided to respond honestly. "I'm really sorry, but I don't think it's fair for me to contribute to something I wasn't invited to." My parents were not pleased. They argued that family is about supporting one another, and this was a significant life event. I felt trapped, torn between loyalty to my family and my own feelings of exclusion. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not pay for the wedding. I stood my ground, even as my family pushed back, insisting that I was being selfish. As the wedding day passed, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. I knew I had made the right choice for myself, but part of me still longed for a connection with my sister. Weeks passed, and I watched as Sarah and Mike settled into their newlywed life, posting pictures of their honeymoon and adventures. My heart ached with envy and hurt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something irreplaceable. One day, I received a call from Sarah. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone surprisingly serious. "I want to know why you didn't contribute to the wedding." I felt a wave of anger and sadness crash over me. "Because I wasn't invited," I snapped. "You made it clear I wasn't important enough to be there, so why should I pay?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I didn't think you would want to come," she finally admitted. "I thought it might be too much for you." My heart sank. "Too much? You mean the idea of watching my own sister marry someone I've never met?" I was hurt, Sarah. "You left me out of something so important." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "I just didn't want to put you in an uncomfortable position." Her words stung, but I could hear the remorse in her voice. "I wanted to keep the wedding small and intimate," she continued. "I didn't realize how much it would hurt you." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could salvage our relationship. "I wish you had talked to me about it," I said softly. "I would have loved to support you. But not like this." We talked for hours, both of us crying and trying to understand each other's perspectives. By the end of the conversation, I felt a glimmer of healing, but I knew it would take time. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter from Sarah. In it, she apologized for her choices and how they affected me. She expressed her love and desire to reconnect, inviting me over for a dinner to talk things through. I felt a rush of emotions as I read her words. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I agreed to meet. That evening, as we sat together, the tension slowly melted away. We talked openly, sharing our feelings and frustrations. I realized that we both had to adjust to the new dynamics of our relationship, especially with her now being married. In the weeks that followed, we rebuilt our bond. It wasn't perfect, and we still had moments of tension, but we were learning to communicate better. I started to see a new side of Sarah, one that was more empathetic and understanding. I realized that while we had lost something during the wedding, we were gaining something deeper. Our relationship began to heal, and I learned that it was okay to stand up for myself. I also discovered that family dynamics can change, but love and communication can bridge those gaps. I felt grateful for the chance to rebuild our relationship and create new memories together. So, aita for not paying for my sibling's wedding when I wasn't invited? No, I realized that it was my right to prioritize my feelings, but it also taught me the importance of open communication and relationships. Sometimes, it takes a painful experience to truly understand each other, and I'm grateful that we were able to come together in the end.